Misinformation in the Media was a talk hosted by Plains FM and presented by journalist Vicky Wilkinson-Baker. Vicky has worked in radio news for 9 years, both in New Zealand and Australia. She worked for TV1 for 27 years as a reporter for One News, Holmes and Fair Go. She's covered a huge range of stories, from the Christchurch earthquakes, Pike River, big court trials like the David Bain retrial here in Christchurch. She also covered consumer stories, exposed a few bad people who were ripping people off, and she covered floods and droughts and disasters, plus a whole lot of human interest stories with ordinary people who found themselves in extraordinary situations. Then, in 2012, Vicky became a full-time tutor at the New Zealand Broadcasting School. She takes the second-year journalism students, which means teaching about 20 students how to produce news and current affairs for radio, television, online, and podcasts. Because their stories are published on various platforms, including Plains FM, the work has to be up to broadcast standard, so it's a bit like running the biggest newsroom in the South Island with the most inexperienced team. Vicky has also worked for New Zealand's favourite television show, Country Calendar, doing 1 or 2 episodes a year depending on her workload. And so we're very lucky to have such an experienced journalist present for us tonight.
Welcome, everybody, and welcome to all of you who are watching from home. It's really great to do this, and it's a pleasure to be involved because you have such a great. It's just great to have all your programs and your input on Plains and everything. So tonight, misinformation and defamation. That's what we're going to talk about. Okay, Plains FM. So chatting with Laura the other day, 120 broadcasters, something like 80 programs, 20 different languages, because defamation in a foreign language is just as dangerous as defamation in English. It's a privilege to have a platform on Plains, as you do, because it's really important to connect with your communities and inform them. But with that comes responsibilities, and that's what we're going to talk about tonight. So you're all familiar with the Broadcasting Standards Authority. So, and you will know that what you have to say on the radio has to be accurate. If it's a controversial issue, it needs to be fair and balanced. You can't discriminate or denigrate against any sections of the community. So this means you can't discriminate or say anything offensive about male or female, sexual orientation, race, age, disability, religion, other cultures, those sorts of things. But I'm pretty sure you're well aware of all of that. So what is misinformation? Misinformation is stuff that's inaccurate, it's misleading, it's wrong, it's not factual, and it's not the truth. And it's really dangerous to repeat this information, this sort of stuff, this sort of material, and it's really dangerous to broadcast it. So you will get into trouble if you do that, and that's why we're here tonight. And that leads to lots of complaints. And I understand you get a few complaints at Plains FM, and anything serious will go to the Broadcasting Standards Authority. So we don't want that. We want to avoid that. So sources of misinformation, probably the critical sources, the most crucial sources of misinformation these days is social media. Not everything on social media is wrong, but it's really hard to sort out what's correct and what's not. So you've got to be very careful on Facebook or Meta, Twitter, TikTok, Google, YouTube. Some of this material comes across as credible, but it's not checked. It's not factual. These organizations don't employ journalists, so they don't check information. Frequently, it's not factual. Often it's rehashed, unverified rumors, and it's false information. And often it's just people's opinions, and often it's conspiracy theories, which are just not factual at all. And these are the sorts of things you've got to be very careful about if you're going to repeat them. So we've all heard this saying about going down a rabbit hole, and that means it's bad, that red cross there. So probably one of the ones you're most familiar with is QAnon. And this conspiracy theory and this whole thing developed in about 2017 on a website called 4chan. And what they were pushing, what their beliefs were, was that Donald Trump was waging a war against pedophiles and against child trafficking. A whole lot of people believed this. They felt that the Democrats were responsible for it, that Hillary Clinton was going to be arrested, that Joe Biden was going to be arrested on the day of his inauguration, and that Donald Trump would be reinstated as president. None of this has happened, which tells you how much credibility QAnon has got. And these beliefs spread rapidly via all the main social media sites, and so many people believe them. It's really, really frightening. I knew I had to correct something. That's wrong. And I'm not quite sure why I had mainstream there. But anyway, right here, we've got a homegrown one, Counterspin, and Kelvin Alp and Hannah Spera. They were in court here in Christchurch just last week. So a lot of the stuff that they put up is their opinions. It's not factual. So they've been charged over allegations of sharing links to objectionable material. So the way I kind of weigh up an outfit like Counterspin is, if they're going to put up objectionable material, I'm not really interested in much else that they've got to say at all. So I just don't think they're credible. So they are anti-government. And it's not wrong to criticize our government, but you have to do it correctly and through the right channels and do it objectively. They're anti-mainstream media, and they often say that the media is paid for by government, and some, like Radio New Zealand does get government funding, but they don't have editorial control over Radio New Zealand. They do their own stories. They run heaps of stories that are critical of the government. So it's okay for them to have an opinion and say that mainstream media, they don't like mainstream media and they're critical of it, but it's not really founded on fact. It's just their viewpoint. They say they're fighting for freedom of speech. Once again, that's quite a good objective, but they're not using fact-based, evidence-based arguments to come to that conclusion. And often they're pushing divisive and extreme views. And we've got to really wonder whether we want that sort of stuff out there. So I'd be very wary of repeating anything you find on a website like Counterspin. So if I wanted to get some background information and read up on things, there are a number of reliable sources to go to. So any of the mainstream media go to work every day, and their whole reason for being there is to put news out there and information out there that is fair and accurate and correct. Okay? And they largely do that day after day. They have teams of journalists and editors who are checking stories and making sure that the information going out is correct. They have a code of conduct which they work by. And they're also accountable to both the BSA, which is the Broadcasting Standards Authority, and the Media Council. And they will also give you background on different perspectives on any topic as well. You know, should give you a range of views on an issue. Sorry, that needs to come down a line. I thought I did that before. Okay, but here's a warning. Even though they put out largely reliable information that's factual and accurate, they make mistakes every now and then. They don't do it on purpose. And if you repeat what they've said and you've got it wrong, you are still in trouble, because you really need to do your own work to verify information. So if you repeat a mistake and that mistake is defamatory, you too are responsible, and so is Plains. So that's a really important point to remember. So journalists should always and usually do verify information. That's our job. That's what we're meant to do. So if we look at what defamation is when you criticize a person or an organization publicly and you damage their reputation. Or you criticize a person and an organization publicly and you think you're right, but you don't have the proof to back up those allegations in court, you've still defamed them and you're still going to be in trouble. So they can take you to court, they can sue you for damages, and you may have to pay them a lot of money. So you can see why it's important to get the facts right and be very careful what you say. So here are some examples. We have a textbook that my students use, and it's called Intro. And there's a chapter, Ursula Chair from Canterbury University wrote it, and it lists a whole lot of things that people said or wrote that are defamatory. So here's some examples, and you might not think these seem that serious, but they are. They're false statements, so therefore they're regarded as defamatory. So saying a married man is into wife swapping, that's offensive. If that's wrong, that's defamatory. Claiming a celebrity is a bad parent, that's defamatory. Tweeting that a top sports person has fixed matches. Claiming a man bribed an MP, a member of parliament, to help his company get some work. See how we're criticizing these people? So if you're criticizing people and you're not correct, it's defamatory. Accusing a mayor of being corrupt. Now, we should be able to question whether the mayor is doing their job correctly. That's what journalists do. But they need to get their facts right before they say someone is corrupt. That's a serious allegation. You'd need a lot of facts and paperwork to back that up. If you state a company is in financial difficulties and it's not, that's defamatory. If you say products will cause ill health or make someone sick, you need proof of that. Otherwise, it's defamatory. If you say someone's a gang member and they're not, that's defamatory. So they're not all huge, serious kind of accusations, are they? There's sorts of things you might say in a conversation, but you can't say them on the radio. You might say them around the dinner table, but you can't say them on a radio station. So just recently, we had a really good example of how you can get into trouble. And so NZME, which runs the Herald News Talk and various websites, the Herald website and some others, they had 3 employees repeat rumours on a podcast and social media. They claimed that Clark Gayford, the Prime Minister's partner, was facing drug charges. He's not. So Clark Gayford took NZME to court. NZME could not prove the allegations because there is no proof because he's not facing drug charges. They had to make a public apology in July, and there was quite a large confidential payout. So this was completely avoidable. These 3 young broadcasters should have done a few things before they went public, and these are things that you guys can learn from this and do as well. So these rumours about Clark Gayford being on drug charges have been around for years. They've been around since Jacinda became Prime Minister. So if they had gone and checked with their colleagues in the newsroom, and in your case, you could go and talk to Nikki or Laura or Pia or someone else at Plains and say, hey, have you heard this stuff? They might say, yeah, those rumours have been going around for ages. So we'd want to be careful about that. We probably wouldn't want to say that. So they could have checked with their colleagues. Interestingly enough, there was an article published, I think I'm just trying to think, I think the police had to make a statement back in 2018 to clarify the fact that there were no charges because it came up then as well. And David Fisher, one of the top journalists in the country, did an investigation into it and came out and said this: exhaustive inquiries by the Herald have found no substance to false rumours. So if these young people had gone into the newsroom and spoken to the news director or the chief reporter or the editor, they might have been told, guys, there's nothing in this. And that would have avoided a massive payout and a lot of embarrassment. So the thing is, if there's no proof, then you don't say it. It's that simple. If you make a mistake, because we all make genuine mistakes, if you make a mistake, what we teach the students and what most news organizations would say is you've got to own that mistake and fast. You need to tell Nikki, Laura, or Pia, because just say, hey, look, we've done this and we've made a mistake. You would apologize as fast as possible and correct it as fast as possible. And that's what we teach our students to do, because that's really important. Because if there's a follow-up complaint about it and you've been seen to act quickly and responsibly, that will reflect much better on you. If you try and cover it up, these things never go away. So own it. Tell the people at Plains, apologize as fast as you can in the same program, the next program, later in the day, correct it as soon as you can, and then just learn from that. So here's the other interesting thing. What if you hear about someone doing something really bad and you're thinking, my community needs to know about this? Someone's running a restaurant and they're ripping people off, or they're employing people, they're not paying them correct amount of money, or there's something not right at the church, and you think, actually, I feel we need to do something about this. We can't just let this go without trying to sort out the problem. So you should do something about it. So once again, I would start with the team at Plains and see whether they can help you with it. They would probably say, let's not put it on the radio at the moment, but let's see what we can do to try and investigate it. You could raise the issue privately with the company or the business or the operator or whoever it is, or the church, and see if that's appropriate, and you can do something that way. You can go to the police and get them to investigate it. You can go to an ombudsman, race relations. Maybe the council would like to know about some stuff if it's relevant to them. There's a number of different organizations that may potentially investigate it, because it's not correct. If people are doing bad things, we want to catch them and we want to stop them. So the other thing is relevant government departments. So they investigate things like workers being exploited, or immigration, or benefit fraud and things like that. Serious fraud, there's a serious fraud office. So potentially one of these organizations could investigate it. You could go to the press, newspaper, and see whether they would investigate it. Okay, that's a possibility. You give them a tip-off, and then they might go out and investigate it, and 2 or 3 weeks later, you might see it in the paper, and they've done all the hard work for you. Community law might help in some situations, and maybe Consumers Advice Bureau as well, a Citizens Advice Bureau as well. Because the main thing is you don't want those things to continue if people are getting hurt and ripped off. So just to give you an idea of what journalists do, this is me way back in the day when I had blonde hair. If we got a tip off on something, and I've got an example in a moment to share with you, we would probably spend days or weeks on and off investigating and getting information before we would publish anything. We would get proof, preferably written proof. We would interview a number of different people affected by this situation and check all their stories and see if we can make sure they're telling us the truth and challenge them. Okay, because if we're going to go on the radio or the television, we need to be right. We also have to give the person who's been accused of something, we've got to give them the right of reply. So that's really important. And often stories end up before the Broadcasting Standards Authority. And one of the criticisms, and you were criticizing me, but you didn't give me time to respond and put my side of the story. So you have to be fair to the person you're criticizing. You have to give them a chance to respond, and you have to take a balanced approach to that and include what is relevant to the story. They're entitled to a right of reply. Newsrooms have lawyers who check these stories before they go to air. And then, and only then, do they publish something. So there's a lot of work that goes into these stories before you see them on the television, read them in the newspaper, or hear them on the radio, these investigative type stories where we're criticizing people and saying they're not doing their job. I've got another little example here, and I'll just get this. This was a story, sorry, be back in a moment. This was in the press in 2017, and I've taken the guy's face out, and I'm not going to mention his name because this all happened in 2017, and I think that's such a long time ago now. It's probably unfair to drag it all up and mention who he is and everything. But it was a really good story, and it was a story that needed to be out in the public domain. It was definitely in the public interest. So the story is that there's a rugby boss, and he's selling his home to repay $200,000 that was missing from the club. That's a lot of money. That's all the money that people have paid for their sports fees and things like that, their club fees, and suddenly all this money's gone missing. So 2 reporters worked on this for 2 weeks before they produced this story. They received a tip-off, so someone rang up, just like I'm saying you could do if you came up with a good story. Someone rang them up and gave them a tip-off. So Charlie, one of the reporters here who I spoke to the other day to check some of this, he phoned dozens of club members until he found a couple who would speak to him. They'd all been told to keep quiet, to cover it up, to not talk to the media, but they kept on ringing people until they found a couple of club members who would confirm it. Then they got someone to show them a copy of an email, which was their proof. It took a while to get that, and it said that the man was repaying the money, and that was their proof. So they were very pleased to have that. I don't think they got emailed it. I think he thought they might have photographed it. So someone showed them a copy of the email sent out by the club, and they photographed it. They then contacted the club president for comment. They then went round and talked to the man concerned to get his side of the story. He didn't want to comment, so they mentioned that. Then they write this article, and it's very carefully worded, and then it was checked by the lawyer. So you can see why it's so important to go through the correct process. If you come across something that you think's unfair or wrong and you want to talk about it, you've got to be very careful before you just turn the mic on and start saying stuff about it. Otherwise, you'll end up in trouble. So that's just to show you the process that we would go through to do a story, and they worked really hard on that, and I think that was a front page story. Okay. We just have a little look at an issue for a moment about how the media cover it and how we need to be careful that we're reporting and talking about factual stuff and being fair and balanced in how we cover issues. So there's lots of issues that you could say fall into this category. There's all the conflicts that we've got overseas where you've got 2 sides, and it's very hard to find the middle line, and people have their own opinions. But let's look at this one about vaccines. So the media has a responsibility to be fair and balanced when we report or talk on these issues, despite our personal views. So you can bet that out of all the reporters who've done stories on whether vaccines are good and bad, a whole lot of them will probably think they don't like them and they don't want one. And maybe they were against the mandate, but they still had to do stories straight down the middle with both sides in them. So social media, of course, had a tremendous amount to say on COVID and COVID vaccines. And they raised a lot of issues around side effects from the vaccine. That's what I wanted to talk about. Something like, over 1,900 people have died from COVID-19 itself, but there were rumors that many were also dying from the vaccine. Okay, now it's true. Some people did die from the vaccine, and there are side effects. So if you go to what I would class as a reliable website, which is our Ministry of Health website, you can find this information. It's not like anyone's trying to hide it. So you don't have to get this information from social media. You can get it from sites like this. So the Director General of Health, it's his job to put information out. And even though some people criticized him, it wasn't perfect, but it was reasonably good and reasonably transparent. The side effects are listed on the Ministry of Health website. I just had a look the other day and they're all there. The side effects are there, major ones, rare ones, minor ones. And they were updated as we got information on those things. If anyone dies in suspicious circumstances in New Zealand and most countries, it's referred to the coroner. And I would say when I was hearing reports about, so-and-so's died and they died straight after having the vaccine, I'd be thinking, I really want to wait and see what the experts have got to say on this. And our experts in this system is the coroner. Social media in these situations is dangerous because it's people's opinions, it's often not factual, and quite often it's wrong. So there's a coroner's inquest that's been running last week and this week in relation to this young man, Rory Nairn. And he's from Dunedin, and he died in November last year, 12 days after the vaccine. And he did have the vaccine. He died of myocarditis, which is a known and rare side effect listed on the website. So on the surface of it, you'd think, oh, well, that's really straightforward. He has the vaccine's really bad, don't have the vaccine, you might die. But it's not that simple. When you get all these experts giving their evidence at a coroner's inquest, you start to get a much better, fuller picture of what went on. So last year, the Ministry of Health updated the website to say this is a problem. If you have the vaccine and you're getting chest pains or heart flutters and things like that, you need to seek help. The pharmacist, where he got the vaccine, did not read the update. This is what the evidence is showing. The woman who actually, I think it was a woman who actually gave him the injection, she didn't know this either, so she didn't tell him anything about it. So Rory has the injection, he's not warned. When he felt unwell, he didn't seek help. So yes, the vaccine was responsible, but the process could have been managed better. So evidence yesterday was, they went over the fact that the updates and the messaging around this was confusing. So what we learn from that, and hopefully this is why we have a process which is kind of fact and evidence-based, is that they will change the system and everyone will learn from this. This young man has died, and there's been some really tragic and sad evidence about that. He was about to get married. He just bought his first house, and so this is really awful for them. But hopefully in our system, a fact-based system with experts, we will learn from this and it will improve. And they're going to look at how, so what help he should have got and needed to get if he'd gone to Dunedin Hospital. So that's the importance of waiting and waiting to get the expert point of view. Okay, I'm just going to deal briefly with what is fact and what is opinion. So I've explained how journalists deal with facts, how we check things, we ring experts, we think about stuff, we analyze stuff, and we try and get a whole lot of different viewpoints before we come to conclusions on things. And then we try to write very carefully and word it very carefully when we're putting it out in the public domain. And we have a responsibility to be fair and balanced on all issues, but especially controversial issues that we've got two sides on, okay? So the difference with opinion is it's just someone's belief. It might be based on what they've seen on social media. It's not usually based on fact. Sometimes there's no proof of what they say, and it's usually one side of the issue. So it's quite different to how a journalist operates. And a lot of opinion on social media, and that's something you can listen to and read and take into account, but it's not something you can assume is correct and factual. Okay, that's about it, actually. So my conclusions are you need to be very careful when you're criticizing, okay, on the radio. When you turn that mic on and you're going to say something critical, you need to be very careful and think it through. You need to make sure what you say is factual and you can prove it. You need to remember that there are two sides to every story and that you have a responsibility to be fair and balanced. So overriding all of this is, I would say, just seek advice before broadcasting, because that's the most important thing. You can find out stuff, but you can talk about it and then not turn the mic on and say it, and you're okay. You can do some more work on it and maybe talk about it at a later date, but you want to be safe, rather than sorry. So there we go. Thank you, everybody, everyone at home, kia kaha, and keep up all your great work because your programs are great.